welcome back to another episode of the Dylbozer's Den. And today we'll be discussing the third record from Oakland, California's own Necrot, Lifeless Birth. I became familiar with this band around 2020 as the singles for their second album, Mortal, were starting to drop. I really enjoyed the very kind of primitive and raw sounding death metal, very pounding, very driving death metal. It made me think of bands such as Autopsy, Early Immolation, and Incantation. And it didn't help either that Decibel magazine was hyping this band up a lot with interviews and the tour that they were on. And this band is also lauded by a lot of my favorite bands, such as Cannibal Corpse. I think I missed Blood Offerings when it came out in 2017. I shrugged it off as just another trad revival death metal act. That was kind of the tail end of a lot of the HM2 clone bands, which that got a little played out like any genre does after a while. You know, not everybody sounded like Black Breath or Trap Them in bands of that ilk. A lot of bands started to just sound like the same. Like all they wanted to do was sound like Entombed or Dismember or Carnage. It's very rare you get bands that kind of stand out from that, a la Necrot, Gatecreeper, that sort of thing, that bring the traditional sounds into the forefront and make it their own. And that's what this band has done with Lifeless Birth. It is the same lineup that was on the Mortal album, and I believe that was on Blood Offerings from 2017. Chad Gailey on drums, Luca Indrio on bass and vocals, and Sonny Reinhardt on guitars. I didn't realize until probably sometime late last year that Sonny was in kind of the stoner rockers saviors for a lot of years. Who would have thought? But I guess being from the Oakland, California area, you know, you end up playing a lot of different bands. I know I had always heard Matt Pike talk about Sonny in interviews as like just being a shredder. This record definitely highlights those accolades brought on by his peers. They make a lot of noise and are really big sounding for a three-piece band. The production on this record is handled by Greg Wilkinson, who runs Earhammer Studios, as well as plays an Autopsy. He's done records for Body Void, High on Fire, Ulthar. It is mastered by Brad Boatwright of Audio Siege Media, who has done work with bands such as 16, as in the doom metal band 16, not the world famous Bowling Green, Kentucky band that talks about baseball in all of their songs. The production on this record is a little bit different from the prior two releases, as you can actually hear the bass guitar and it takes up a lot of space on this record. Every single song, you can hear the bass just holding the fundamental down. And as a three-piece, that's really what you want. I like albums that really use that tactic. You know, it sounds like they are live. It's not just, hey, we've layered the shit out of guitars and we're a three-piece band and somehow we have to recreate this live. Yep, there may be one or two guitar tracks for rhythms and there's leads kind of down the middle, but you can still hear the bass in there, so it still just sounds like three guys in a room playing the record, which I really enjoy. The artwork is again handled by Maren van Halsteren, who has done work for Metallica, Mastodon, Baroness, as well as the prior two Necrot albums. I like the continuity of this. It makes me think of maybe Death, even though Death ended up changing album artist after a while. They all had a very similar vibe to them. I look at the individual thought patterns in the Human records as the two that really stand out for me with that. You know, the Ed Repka stuff with the first three records as well. But they really stuck to that. And I think the album art and this style for this band are just go hand in hand with the music. This was released through Tank Crimes, which I know Austin Paulson, my co-host, is a big fan of that label and most of its output, as that label was a big gateway for him getting into a lot of the underground music as well as the thrash and death metal adjacent music he's into. You know, they've worked with bands such as Exhumed, Municipal Waste, Iron Reagan, the names go on. So let's get into the record a little bit. What I noticed on this record is that they really honed in on the songwriting on this album. It was almost like they were listening to some classic records, a la Far Beyond Driven by Pantera, The Bleeding by Cannibal Corpse. You can definitely tell they worked on song structure a lot. The album really makes me think of the band Grave, not to get too deep in the woods with like comparisons. Their album Solace in particular. Hooks upon hooks all over this album. I mean, the debut single, Cut the Cord, not only does it have a great hook, it's got one of the greatest riffs that's all over the song. Sonny knows his way around a riff, and this album is no different in that. Lifeless Birth, which is just a straightforward punch in the head. My favorite song of the album is probably Superior. The main riff on this song makes me think of the Behemoth track Conquer All. Doesn't necessarily sound like the track, but the vibe is there. What's really, really rad about this riff in particular, it's like it plays the riff in 3 separate ways and it plays it in 3 separate keys. So there's a little bit of modulation there and maybe a couple notes will change here and there, but I fucking love it. You're on to the next single, which is Drill the Skull, which is a great ass beater of a track. Definitely sounds like Slayer's Criminally Insane with kind of the drum beat at the beginning of it.
Winds of Hell
Has a little bit more experimentation at the end with some of the guitar stuff at the tail end of the song. Definitely some layered guitar stuff in there that I thoroughly enjoyed and I thought broke the album up a little bit. Dead Memories, great track. Probably the best song ever named Dead Memories by a heavy metal band. And then we're off to the last track, which is The Curse. I thought this was going to be an instrumental track at first. The way it plays out, it's the longest track on the album with roughly about 8.5 minutes. Doesn't take away from the impact of the track. I can't get past the fact that I've reviewed a lot of more experimental or layered or kind of ambient, atmospheric kind of death metal records and these cavernous sounding death metal bands recently. And it was nice to really listen to an album that was straightforward, meat and potatoes. You know what you're getting. It's lean. It's 7 songs. It's 40 minutes long. The guys definitely focused on more songwriting craft in this. I really enjoy the fact that I can remember the hooks. That's a big thing for me when it comes to any form of music is I need to be able to remember the hooks, Cut the Cord, Drill the Skull, Superior, Lifeless Birth. I can remember I could keep going with all the tracks on the record, but I can remember every hook on this already. Like I mentioned earlier, I definitely hear these guys listening to Cannibal Corpse's The Bleeding, Far Beyond Driven. You know, I hate to even say it. Maybe they were even taking cues from something like the Black Album or something like Countdown to Extinction. But I also hear like Possessed, Creator, you know, those very early death metal bands. This is a great record. I hope everybody enjoys it. I hope everybody just buys it on the artwork alone. This is going to be one of the best death metal records of the year, and we're just early on part of the year. So thank you again for joining me. If you want to tell me to fuck myself, please do it. If not, I'll see you next time.